Many of the protesters in Ferguson point to a system that unfairly tilts the balance, they say, towards those in the police service. Joining us now for more on the validity of that belief and with some comparisons as to how the system works in Canada. Here's Ian Scott, former director of the SIU, the Special Investigations Unit, and former Toronto police officer David Mercury, also a former criminal lawyer. Good to see you gentlemen back here at TVO.
See you.
Let's just start with the differences in system here, because they've got a grand jury process, which we do not have. I'm not sure anybody else in the world has it anymore. But Ian, let's start with this. The grand jury's job in this case was to do what?
Well, they're supposed to review the evidence and decide whether or not to issue a true bill, which is a very low standard. It would be kind of, Dave can help me with this, it would be almost a standard that police officers use for reasonable and probable grounds to lay a criminal charge.
That's right.
So it's just supposed to sort of get the system going. Even in the U.S., as I understand it, not all American states have a grand jury. We've abolished it in Canada. We abolished it in the 19th century.
We don't have this anymore. Does anybody have it anymore?
Nobody has it. The United States is the only common law country that has grand jury.
So they impaneled, in this case here, they impaneled a grand jury of citizens to look at this situation, and they came back with no charges.
Well, no bill, which is equivalent to saying no reasonable and probable grounds of criminal offense took place in these circumstances. But I got to tell you, within that grand jury, it's a system that's completely alien to us. You have a prosecutor who's in a room with these members of the grand jury who can vary, what, David, between 12 and 23?
Historically, it's between 12 and 24.
24, there 24. You go. In this case, it had 12, which is kind of ironic because that's the size of our, what we call petty juries up here for trials. And the prosecutor runs the complete show. There's no judge, there's no other lawyers. They ask all the questions. It's literally the show of the prosecutor. In fact, there's an expression in the U.S. that if a prosecutor can't indict a ham sandwich, then he's not doing his job properly.
Well, in this case, they couldn't indict a police officer who many people, obviously thousands of people in the streets, thought ought to have been charged. Are we in any position? Right? Well, let's get into that. Are we in any position, David, having not heard what the grand jury heard, are we in any position to render our judgment on the decision they came to?
Well, I can only compare it with our system where we would have a preliminary hearing. And in a preliminary hearing, if there is any evidence upon which a jury could convict, then it's committed for trial.
Then you go forward.
Exactly. So in this case, the Crown's job is normally to try and get a committal to trial. And what I'm hearing and what I'm reading and how the evidence was led and examination was, is that any evidence that bolstered the police side of things, the Crown was fairly easy in his questioning, and in anything that was contrary to that, he really grilled them. So it's like
the fix was in.
It's or he doesn't want it to be committed for trial, and I think that's what everyone's so upset about.
Could you speculate on that? Why would the prosecutor in this case not want this case to go to trial?
I don't know the man. I've never met the man, but what I do know is his father was a police officer who was shot and killed by a black man. In my estimation, he shouldn't have been the Crown on this.
So he's got a conflict, an appearance of conflict baked in.
Right, and there's the expression, and Ian, you know the expression, justice has to not only be done, but appear to be done. Well, everybody's going to question that.
Do you have reason to, based on what you've seen, read, and heard, question the neutrality of the prosecutor in this case?
Well, minimally, there's an optics issue, minimally. The fact that he's the prosecutor in that jurisdiction, prosecutors work generally very closely with the police. Apparently he'd been involved in other cases involving potentially indictment of police officers, and again, they were not indicted. So yeah, I mean, minimally, one other thing about these grand juries, they're held in secret. So it's very hard to assess the matter. Now, it's coming out now after the no bill. Apparently the transcripts are being related now. And there's something that's very unusual in these circumstances, which we would never see in a preliminary inquiry in Canada, which is the potential accused testified at this grand jury and apparently was not particularly well cross-examined.
The police officer, Darren Wilson, in question, testified before the grand jury.
Exactly, and he got to tell his story not under, as I understand it, any really effective cross-examination. So You know, this is something that would be very different with our system, and makes it very difficult to sort of weigh what these rumors we hear about right now.
So in which case you're not surprised that the jury came to the conclusion it came to, if that was what was adduced.
Well, I'm not overly surprised, but once again, it's like every trial. You've got to look at each piece of the evidence and kind of fit it together. I mean, maybe at the end of the day it all made sense. I'm not sure, but there's some due process issues here which really I find very troubling. A, the secrecy. B, the fact that the evidence of the potential accused was not subject to any form of vigorous cross-examination. Very, very troubling.
David, does this mean that the officer who fired the fatal shots is now free and clear?
At this time, however, there could be federal charges leveled against him for...
And how would that be different from what he's just undergone?
Well, it's very much like you saw with Rodney King.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, it's exactly the same thing, as a matter of fact.
Okay, and is he, I mean, presumably at any point as well, a civil case could be brought against him as well.
Absolutely, which really surprises me that he's like on television and he's talking so much, and I don't know if you heard that he wants to teach use of force. you know, maybe he doesn't listen to his counsel, but his counsel should be saying to him, you know, ixnay on the interviews and, you know, be quiet.
Well, one of the things I also said was that it's not a question of if, but when he's off the force. He's going to be leaving that line of work.
He's saying himself that he can't work. He feels that he would be in danger. He'd put his fellow officers in danger, and you know that could be very well true.
Right, and that may be some kind of deal in the background as well. That he would resign, just try to take the heat off the police service.
But that's not a solution.
No, it's not.
You know, his resignation or him not being on the force.
Not a solution to the bigger question.
Exactly.
Well, let's get into that right now.
The accountability issue, yeah, I agree.
Let's get into that, because I've got something to, Sheldon, let's put this up. I've got to read this here. Research from Bowling Green State University found that from 2004 to 2011, 41 U.S. police officers were charged with murder or manslaughter relating to on-duty shootings. Over the same period, the FBI reported 2,718 justified law enforcement homicides, an incomplete count of the total number according to researchers. This all raises the question of why is it apparently so rare for police officers in the United States to be charged with murder? Ian, do you have any theories on that?
Well, police officers have protections under, certainly, I assume there's analogies in the U.S., under the Canadian Criminal Code. Police officers have the right to use reasonable force in the execution of their duties, and reasonable force can include lethal force in certain circumstances. And of course they have as well all of the other defenses that the citizen has in terms of self-defense and defense of others. You know, at the end of the day, we as the state arm police officers and ask them to, in fact demand once they've sworn an oath, to enforce the law. And sometimes enforcing the law is not a pretty thing. Sometimes enforcing the law requires use of force, and sometimes that force ends up being lethal.
David, from what you know, does it look like the United States has a problem with police officers on too many occasions getting away with what the people think is murder?
For now, we're just talking about the United States, and I would say yes. And I agree with you, Ian, but one thing that I think that hasn't been said is that I believe when police usually investigate police. I know it's different here in Ontario, okay? However, when you're investigating something, you can be investigating to get someone, or you can be investigating to find a reason not to get someone or to get someone off. So when police are investigating their own, they do it differently.
Built-in conflict.
It's not a theory. I've seen it. That's how it is.
You've seen it from your days as a police officer.
Absolutely. And you know, we talk about the thin blue line, okay? And that expression romanticizes police non-cooperation. They're backing each other up. You know, when it happens in the community, we say the community's not cooperating. Well, that's exactly what the thin blue line is all about. They're not cooperating. And there's a double indemnity there, because the police have a sworn duty to uphold the law. Not to protect each other, not to back each other up, to uphold the law.
Ian, I'm curious actually in your view on this, because you were the head of the Special Investigations Unit, which is an institution in the province of Ontario designed to prevent cops from investigating cops when there are controversial circumstances. Does that mean we can conclude, for lack of a better expression, we're better at this than they are?
Oh, I think we are better. I mean, I still think there's room for improvement. The SIU was a huge step forward, and at the time it happened, about 24 years ago in Canada, it was really the only institution that did it. It's got a number of issues, which I've discussed, but overall, the idea of having a model that when there's incidents involving on-duty police officers of serious injury and death, that they are investigated by an outside agency is an extremely good one. And the SIU is, at this point, virtually a gold-plated model in that area. When I was there, I made an effort to try to civilianize a number of the full-time investigators, and by the time I left, I think 50% were civilian. Because there's still a cultural issue. You want to rely on those former police officers for their skill set, but you also want to sort of have a different perspective of the culture within the SIU.
How hard did you find it in your experience to have charged a police officer who you felt ran afoul of the law?
Well, in the 5 years I was there, I think I laid approximately 53 charges.
For offenses as wide as?
They would range between sexual assault to murder. I mean, I laid the SAMU team murder charge, for example. I looked at the evidence as seriously as I could. I tried to weigh it as well as I could, and made those decisions. I should add that, you know, during the time I was there, I probably looked at over 1,000 files. I think the charge rate was approximately 4% of the charges.
Does that feel about right?
Well, it's hard to say. It's hard to know. It's hard to know what the comparators are.
Right.
And you know, going back to David's point, David's raised a very good point here about, you know, at the end of the day, the case has to be tested in a court of law with evidence called. You've got to have somebody who's in the stand under oath who's going to be cross-examined, and the trier of fact, either a judge or a jury, has to decide beyond a reasonable doubt on the issue of guilt. So the question of the evidence is a difficult one, and it goes to an issue that you and I have discussed in the past about wearable cameras. I mean, to some degree, if we advance to police officers having cameras, it will improve the quality of the evidence in many circumstances, in favor of police officers and potentially against them as well.
You know, ever since that Conservative MP came out with that press release yesterday about wearable cameras, I just think about the issue in a whole different way now. But that's another issue for another day.
But can I add, Steve, that, you know, part of, and I'm agreeing with what Ian is saying, you know, but, you know, there's also a problem that the SIU has had in that police officers, witness ones, are frequently, often, non-cooperative. And so, you know, that's an issue that's out of your control.
Well, theoretically, there's some control over that. I fought that issue. We went to the Supreme Court of Canada on the issue of police, conferring with a lawyer before they wrote up their notes. We won in the Supreme Court of Canada. It was a long, hard fight. And frankly, in a better world, I would have thought that management of the police services would have said, look, you know, this is a gimme. We want their notes to be independent and contemporaneous. Why are we wasting all this money on lawyers going to the Supreme Court of Canada?
But David, let me follow up on this angle, lest we feel too cocky about this. Clearly, the last few weeks have demonstrated that there are plenty of African Americans in the United States who think that the justice system is rigged against them. If you were an Indigenous Canadian in this country, would you feel the same way?
Absolutely. And I have said that many times. People want to talk about, oh, how wonderful Canada is. And Canada is wonderful, don't get me wrong. However, if you want a comparison, look at the issues against the indigenous people are having here in Canada. Absolutely. That's not to downplay the issues that other people of color are having. However, if you want a really stark example, you know, look at what's happening with Indigenous people, especially out west where there's a greater percentage of them.
From your experience as a police officer, and admittedly, I mean, you were on the service here in Toronto as opposed to out west.
Yeah.
Did it look to you like there were two tiers of justice depending on whether you were Aboriginal or not?
You know, to be very honest with you, I didn't look at it. I'm not saying it wasn't there, but I was looking at black issues because it affected me personally. Right. I was looking at issues of black police officers having to work in Toronto. However, I did see indicators. You know, when you just off the top of your head see an Indigenous person, you're dealing with them and you call them chief. You know, words have power.
Officers
words have
do
meaning.
That?
Absolutely, I've seen that. You know, but at the same time, I've heard officers refer to black people in front of me as chimps. So you know,
you've heard white officers in front of you refer to
black people
in
chimps.
Toronto as chimps.
Right. Absolutely, I have.
Did you call them on that?
Of course, and it's, well, we don't mean you, and you know, but I'll be very honest with you. It puts you in a hard spot, and I, you know, I don't want to get ahead of myself, and forget that I was a police officer, and very often I did nothing, or I, you know, contributed to the subculture, because you do, because you have to work with people, and you're there, and there's also a safety issue.
You wear the uniform.
Pardon?
You're wearing the uniform.
Yeah, exactly. Which is a big part of the reason that I left. However, somebody has to stay. It's a slow process. It's just kind of off of the Ferguson point, but I think that to deal with that subculture, you have to start making witness officers accountable. They've sworn an oath to uphold the law, whether it's a police officer breaking the law or a non-police officer breaking the law, and so I think it's important that we start making them accountable.
With a few minutes left, Ian, let's go here. Let's pick up on the issue that you just raised a few moments ago. Do you think if the officer in question, Darren Wilson, had been wearing those little wearable cameras, as you have recommended,
yes,
this whole case would have just been completely different?
Well, that all depends on the imagery on the wearable camera data, but
we'd know anyway.
We'd know what the story was.
In a way, we don't now.
We don't really know. You see, what happened there is classic in the sense of the murkiness of the evidence, because the difference in those situations of kind of crisis, which virtually all police shootings are, people's recollection of them can vary. And having something like digital imagery can completely change it. And we saw this happen over and over again. Look at the Rodney King case, the Robert Jacansky matter. What's going on with Sammy Yatim is once there's visual imagery, people have a much better sense of what happened.
Does it surprise you at all, David, that 10 people who were supposedly witnesses to this shooting in Ferguson, some of them said that the deceased attacked the police officer, went into his car, was provocative. The others said, no, it didn't happen?
Doesn't surprise me at all. You know, eyewitness accounts are known for being very fallible. However, on the camera issue, I would like to see a technology where that digital imagery is immediately converted to analog.
What, and the value of that
because
is what?
Digital imagery can be, you know, it can be changed, can be, you know, played with, you can be, you know, photoshopped and all of that. Not analog.
I see. Okay.
But I understand there are systems of downloading the imagery such that it can be preserved. They're doing it right now with in-car camera videos.
Yeah,
they go back to they go back to the station. There's immediate downloading. And certainly the SIU, when there was visual or digital imagery, it helped considerably in resolving things, because it's very hard to cross-examine an image. It's pretty easy to cross-examine an eyewitness. That's why over and over again you go back to things like digital imagery and forensic reports, post-mortem reports, things that you think you can rely upon. And then I would look at the statements and see how they could square with things that I could really rely upon, like scientific reports and that sort of thing.
But these cameras aren't the whole answer, because they can fall off.
I agree.
They can be blocked. They can be, all kinds of things. I've seen on the media where someone's trying to take a picture and police officers stand in front of them.
Sure.
I've seen that. Yeah. So it's not the whole answer. And I still think we need to hold witness officers accountable when they do not enforce their oath. They enforce the law and follow their oath.
Gentlemen, thanks for your help on this one. Appreciate
Thank you very much.
Ian Scott, former director of the SIU, David Mercury, former Toronto police officer, former criminal counsel as well.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.